folks. Hello and welcome. This is a session on AstraZeneca's full framework for transforming and modernizing drug discovery. My name is Carlsson, head of US strategy here at Domino, but far more important, we have with us Ronen Artzi, who is the head of technology innovation for oncology, data science, and AI. Yes, excellent. And I mean, it's struck me that there are huge elements of your role which are, I think, common to probably everybody in this room, which is at the end of the day, we are trying to affect transformation and change in our organizations using technology, and we just happen to have the coolest, most exciting technology that's out there. But could you tell folks a little bit about your role, what you do, and your both possible and impossible mandate?
Sure. I like the impossible. So again, Ronen, I've been with AstraZeneca for 12 years, right? But usually it's in a very non-traditional projects and way of working, right? It's always about asking a question and then it being direct, okay, go and get it, go and figure out. So it was really fun when I was part of the IT, moved to the Center of Genomic Research, Precision Medicine, and now I'm in another group called Oncology, Data Science, and AI. It's a relatively newly established group that was created by our EVP, Susan Gilbright, understanding that really technology, data science, and on should sit in the business and should really sit close to on her role. So that's great for us as kind of leading that kind of endeavor. My role is divided to three things in my mind, right? One of them is really about innovation culture. And the word innovation is a bit misleading, right? So everything from creativity to innovation kind of fall into it. I'm not the chief innovator, by all means, right? It is about inspiring other people to get their creativity and bring that to light when we're developing drugs, when we're doing our stuff. So that's really exciting because we have brilliant people in the organization. It just let them fly. Let them understand that it's okay to fail. Let them understand that it's okay to think differently, right? And it could be on many levels. The other pillar is actually technology evaluations, right? We come in with ideas, technologies are just introduced on such a high pace. So our group will look into technology, trying to assess them, to try to, with the hype versus reality in that case, and how that might be related to our work. And the third one that is kind of related is about concept development. And concept doesn't have to be, as I said, earth-shattering, but from my perspective, on one hand, it's removing friction. On the other hand, it's kind of enabling acceleration of science. So for me, game on everything that eventually stop our scientists to do the best, which will contribute to patients, right? So this is a patient-centric organization, scientific-led organization. From time to time, you'll find me battling with access policies on one hand, or potentially just an algorithm around the drug prediction. So it's all of those kind of three pillars. And I'm kind of a chief enabler to some degree, but again, happy to do anything that will make our science shine and our patient in the center. So that's my role currently in AZ.
Well, I wanted to ask whether or not there's anybody here who isn't on the hook for a combination of this, of cultural change, technology, architecture, recommendations. What's the third one again?
Removing frictions.
That minor detail of removing frictions.
Right.
Anybody who that does not apply to here, who doesn't have that as core of what they're doing. So there's a minor detail that, well, how do you go about doing that? And I think we're talking about today is like one of the tools that you developed in order to drive progress on those, the FAIRR framework. Could you tell folks a little bit about the starting point, FAIRR data, or maybe you do better? Who here can tell me what the FAIRR and FAIRR data means? Anybody know what the F is? Excellent. And the A? Excellent. Accessible. The I?
Interoperable.
Interoperable. That's cheating. You know this. And the R?
You said editing.
Exactly. Reusable.
Right.
So could you tell us a little bit about that framework? Obviously being powerful on the data side. Why start there?
Excellent questions. And actually, when I joined like 2 years ago, I was assigned to deal with the last mile problem. people are leaving the organization or they're doing their science work on their own machine, either then they leave or leave the role and so on. And at that point, we are missing either the data or the results or what was done. So that was go and figure out this last mile problem. I'll get to the FAIRR data later, right? And one of the realization was that one person's last mile is somebody else's first mile. And when you take that into a recursive, one company's last mile might be another company's partner first mile. So you can really, really see that connection between how science is flowing, how data is flowing, how analytics are flowing. So from that concept, we said, okay, we already know that we have an initiative, and this is where the FAIRR data, right? Most of you are probably, if you are either in IT or science, you've heard about the FAIRR data. This is about how do you take your data, which is the most important asset, make it findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable. This is awesome. And we did that for years. But now we found that we also need to do that to people's work, to science work. So this is where we come with what we said. This is the FAIRR. We added another R, and we'll talk about that one, FAIRR analytic or FAIRR science. And this is where we took it, that took off to what does it mean to have science being fair, or FAIRR square as we call it? How does that contribute to what we call the science chain of trust? And how does it go beyond AstraZeneca or beyond your specific work to your group work, to across the company works, potentially across companies' work and beyond? So this is where we started this FAIRR square. Actually, it's a FAIRR asterisk. And the first R that we were thinking of was R for reproducibility, right? And I think Nick had really framed it really nicely today, right? There's an R because, at least for science side, if you really want that science to be trusted, if you really want somebody to make sure that what you had claimed is the right claim, people are expecting reproducibility. That's what makes science so rigorous. That's what makes science so interesting to work, assuming that you can count on somebody's claim. And this is where we start, right, with that first square. Nick had also mentioned others, right? So this is why we don't believe that you end with what we call FAIRR square, but it could be FAIRR asterisk, because Nick said that there is a responsible AI, right? On our framework, we took it to AI is only one workload. So I know that we are really excited about AI, and we are too. But this is about responsible science, right? It's about, so it's not just reproducibility, but how do you do things right moving forward? And you can claim more and more R's as you go to FAIRR. So FAIRR is not enough. A conspiracy theory, by the way, said that one of the R's is for the name Ronen, but this is not recorded, right? Oh, it is recorded. Just ignore it. So the next R is probably Ronen and so on. But this is where we started, right? Last mile, realizing that last mile is not actually the only last mile. And these are all connected in a world of science flow. That's how we started.
Well, I mean, it feels like there are a lot of things in what you just said there. As I think the first one feels like it's a broader topic about how so much of what we've historically done has kind of ended with the data. So we have data lineage, we've got data governance, we have data security. And if you're coming in from the data science and AI point of view, well, that's sort of where you begin. It's it's ends roughly at the time when I actually start doing anything with the data. And, that wasn't a problem. I mean, we weren't really doing very much with the data. But the whole purpose of why we're here is that we want to be driving outcomes with these. And so it's really in the analysis, in the models, in the applications that we're building for our data that we get all of that value. But how can we do any of that? How can we have the trust in any of these things and drive the adoption with it if we're not going in and having governance, if we're not providing the ability to go in and actually find the analysis of work that other folks are doing, going and getting access to it, ensuring that we could actually leverage it in our particular use case, ensuring that we can reuse it, and indeed that we can even figure out what somebody did in it previously. And so it's a nice thing that was a story you hear about extending the life cycle. So going from a life cycle where this was mostly about just getting access to the data, maybe a report or visualization, to be one where now this life cycle is going after this broader set of analyses, models, and applications that are going to be built off products effectively that are going to be built off of this. Is that fair, or am I overreaching from And then go ahead.
Absolutely. And I give you Kjell. He had said it's excellent, right? But two things over here. I want you to make sure, I'd like you to go out of this session, not saying that FAIRR data is not important. It's extremely important, right? This is at the essence of how we work, what we should do, and so on. But then the question is, if you're done with FAIRR data, everybody's verified. Is that enough? And I think from this session, I want to make sure that you get out to understand it's not enough, right? This is not where you end. This is actually where you start. But if I may talk about data just for a second, many people, when they're thinking about data, this is what is feeding into the analytics, right? Which is awesome. What is getting out of the analytic? How do you manage results? How do you deal with those? So my claim is that every asset in our world of science is something that needs to be FAIRRable. And yes, if this is data, you have to go to the result. So the result is feeding into something else. So as a minimum, if you don't do anything, if you don't take anything from what I'm saying, make sure that results are part of your FAIRR journey as a starting point. But now the immediate next question would be, and we have what we call a chaos creativity. Results are created, everybody's getting excited. I'm going to report on it. And then the question, can you really back up what you just claimed? Can you really reproduce it? What do you do with that? And that goes to, so it's not enough just to do the data, right? I really need to capture the concept of inputs, outputs, the method that is connected between them, and the environment it was created. And the claim is that if you do that in that abstract way, it applies to everything. We are, in general, human business and processes are all about this abstraction of input, method, output under certain conditions. And that's the one thing that we want to capture, right? We'll call it a scientific unit. It could be a scientific analytic unit. We can call it on the business side. If you abstract it enough, almost everything can be abstracted this way. And what we were looking in, how do we frame it in what AstraZeneca is doing? What do we need to make it useful for our domain? But you can take it to any domain as a concept. So this is one aspect that I think we should hopefully live with, and then we can talk about more specific.
Just going back to actually the things that you said, I think first one you were talking about was that extending the concept of FAIRR data really on two dimensions. One, it's not just FAIRR data, this is FAIRR data analysis, models, products, everything that you're building off of that data, which probably the FAIRR data people had in mind that they were hoping that would be in there too. They just wanted to start where it was going. But the other one is to expand on the FAIRR components themselves, that there are actually other capabilities and other things that you then start needing when you start adding in all of those other artifacts as well.
Absolutely.
Well, and another thing I wanted to touch on was, we sort of take it for granted, what are the benefits that we get from this? So you pointed out today, well, what happens when you lose your data scientist, your researcher, your scientist, or others, is that all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, I really don't know what that person did. There was so much that left with that person that was in that person's head. I might have the individual artifacts if I'm lucky, stored somewhere, but I don't know the connections between them. I might have a version of his data, I might have a version of the analysis, I might have the model, but I don't know how they're connected. But I probably also don't even have the model and the analysis. But one of the other things that when we don't have FAIRR data or FAIRR analytics, what else do we lose? What are the risks that are here when we don't have that findability, that reproducibility, etc.?
Sure, and I'll take it into the analytics side, right? Not just to the data, but obviously some of it is about efficiency and awareness, right? If you cannot find what was done, you're not aware of what was done, you have a gap over there. Maybe the problem that you are looking into correctly was already solved, or potentially could fit into your current way of thinking. So findability is extremely, extremely important. To know what's there. And then the question is, if something is there, can I really access it? What do I do? So knowing that something is there, it's awesome. But if I cannot access it, so that's secondary awesome, right? I'll also look into interoperability. It's about, so if it is there, does it fit into my environment, right? So the more we can find something, enable the access at real time, or shrink the excess friction into zero, being able to use it through interoperability, this is also kind of accelerating my science moving forward. The last one is reusability, right? As we said, find it's great, but can I find something that I can reuse, right? So it's not just search, do a search and then get a list of elements over there, but find it in concept in a way that I can reuse it in context into my current research need or concept. So these are all critical for me to accelerate science. If I can shrink it to zero, and no, we cannot shrink to zero, but the ability for me to find something, take it, access it, reuse it, that's really, really pushed me to the point that now it's only on me, right? I cannot accuse anybody. There is no friction. So now it's pure science, right? Bring your brain into it and make the most of it. And then share it with others so they can find it, they can run it. So that's what we're trying to do, right? Shrink the time, shrink the friction. I was talking about friction. And there's friction in everything. Definability, accessibility, interoperability, reusability, each one of them, God knows that we need to move the needle. And that's what we're trying to do, right? Create a tissue in which at least AstraZeneca will work. Hopefully partners will work, and maybe others will work.
I'm trying to think of a very practical example of what you're describing here, of the bad state beforehand. It would be, I'm a Python user and Jupyter user, and there's all of this incredible work that somebody else is doing over there in SAS, and I have no way of getting access to it, to be even to find what it is that they're doing. And even if I did, because on the interoperability side, I've got no way of taking that and actually reusing any of that or making that part of the pipeline that I'm creating. So if I'm able to go in and align with, just in terms of getting access to the data that SAS user was doing, but have access to all of the artifacts that they're using. And then not just thinking about over to SAS, they're easy to pick on, but on all of the other tools and all of the other on-prem and cloud clusters and all the different places that I get my data, if I could search across all of that and use all of that, then one, we have less of a risk in terms of, well, now people can actually pay attention to what other folks are doing and validate what other folks are doing and have resiliency in case people move and other things like that. But then there's also this huge productivity gain that potentially I won't need to be reinventing the wheel every time that I want to do something. Is that kind of it?
Absolutely. This is definitely a big part of it, for sure. And the other piece is that you don't want to find them in sporadic way, right? It's not just finding the code. It's not just finding the data. You want to take it into the best insight-ready generation environment in which I can take it from, right? It would be awesome if I can put them all together the same way that they were created and then move forward. So that's also kind of, it's not just to find them, right? It's not just a piecing. That takes time. That not only takes time, it also error-prone, have potentially to generate either governance-related gaps or any other kind of gaps that we might have, while you can get the environment ready for you, and from there on, you just run with it.
So extending the metaphor would be a little bit like, well, I could have found out what they did and then be required to go in and rebuild the entire thing over in Python and introduce a whole lot of errors if I could just use their macro, which went and did all of the nice data processing that I needed it to do, and has already been vetted and secured and all the rest of it, then that would be way better.
Yeah, and some of the proof of concept we did on kind of hackathons and so on, can you take an article that somebody had published, and let's put aside the trust just for a second, but it is related. Can I make it come to life into my environment? You took it from a PDF or Trails, and it created an environment that will have the data, the method, and the document. And now you can actually look into it. So these are some of the things that we are doing or thinking of about how to make that environment, that science live. Either bring it in, or when you publish that kind of, so somebody else can look into it and take some, the next step with it. So again, but these are really, really next vision. We do have a lot to do before we're making ourselves fully fair in this first course. Yeah.
I did want to touch on the trust aspect of this. So there's elements of trust where we need trust because we need to satisfy regulators. We need trust because it should enable us with having adoption of this, because it's more reliable, because it's been more vetted, because it's people know that it's gone the process. It is people are more willing to adopt and use it. But trust obviously is it's a big concept, and there's usually no silver bullet for trust. So I think you were talking about chains of trust before. How do you build a chain of trust, or especially when we're starting from a place whereby it's often very, very siloed?
Yeah, well, one aspect is the need to really understand that I think there is a continuous level of trust, right? Starting from, I fully don't trust that one because I have no way to vet it. I have no way to understand what it is. To potentially trust by condition, which means that I can trust this one if I know that this system, these people, and so on had done the right work. And then there is the fully trust, and this is usually when you have your own system, right? You control all the P's, all the processes, and so on. And then in that case, you have a full trust in that kind of way. So obviously, no one person has the full control. No one person can fully trust. So as long as you understand that trust can be at least measured or has an indication, you should associate that with your input or your method and beyond. So this is one aspect. The chain of trust that we said, it was about, first of all, as part of a chain, you have a link, right? So let's assume that you can at least vouch to what is done within link, right? And I say, I trust it because assuming that you can trust the data that was going in, I can look into the method, I can look into the results, and that is trustable. This is nice. One link over there, right? The process of science is actually a chain of processes and collaboration between people that, as we said, one person's output is other person's input. It would be awesome if we can somehow create a whole organization, everybody's providing their links, they're connected, and then we'll be in a great shape. This is also really, really hard to believe that will happen in a day, a week, 2 or years. But as a minimum, if we'll convince people that this link concept is working, and we'll start to spread it in the organization, you will find that one organization, one piece is doing a link, right? And then he created another link with his partner and so on. So created a small chain. And then there will be another small chain within the process of working. If we prove our success and people will be buying into that one, you will find more and more links, more and more chain. Eventually they'll connect. So the next evolution, can I connect it with my partner, right? Can I work with my CRO? Or can I work with whoever is my partner to buy into the same concept? So their data coming to me is becoming from conditionally trusted to a fully trusted. Now I'm actually connected between me and my partners. So the more we spread it, remember the Walmart, I believe they took their, I think they were trying to push either the RFIDs, phones, and so on, as a way to bring it to the community. And by that token, they created their chain flow or value chain, and much more robust and much more trusted in that way. So that's the idea, right? How do we spread it? How do we spread this one from not only us? So when we are submitting that to whoever is looking into our work, whether this is somebody who's looking into our science work, whether somebody needs to vet it, if they will accept that and will be able to run a link, so that will accelerate the way that for me submitting a claim, an FDA claim and so on. Just think about the word that those links will start to propagate. And at the end of the day, instead of having like Intel inside, which was a great logo, so we'll have AZ inside or trust inside, right? Every link by itself, creating trust. When you connect them, the trust is just propagated through the link. But again, that's the concept of science chain of trust. It will take us time. It will take an industry to work on that. It will take some standards over there. But as a minimum, can we control it in AZ? And we believe we can.
So thinking of analogies of these, for some reason, the first thing that comes to mind for me is if you're in a house and you're thinking about why do I trust that this door with these glass panels works, is because each one of those, the glass in each one of those panels has been certified as being a shatterproof piece of glass. The lock in the door is, again, I can trust that it is a certified reliable lock. The hinges, et cetera, and that potentially somebody is going in and certifying the entire door as a whole. So it can decompose trust through processes, standards, and other things, so that we can rely on that these different components that are pulling from different parts can be used together without us going to have to do an investigation, a validation for every single component of it. Is that the way to think of it?
Absolutely. What we're also trying to move or at least to introduce, is as the concept of doing things right seamlessly, right? So as you, and this is one of the friction, these are people that need to do the right things in order to be trusted. So some things can be done for the scientist in a way that he's not even aware that he's doing things right. But when he's having a claim, it's being backed up by the metadata. It's being backed up by the security screen. It might be backed up by other validation tests, right? Rick had mentioned that with Domino, how they move forward. So think about that as a plugin framework to do things right? Some of my scientists don't know how to use GitHub or kind of version control. You can, and not because they were brought in a certain way. They are really focusing on the science. Can I make sure that when they want to publish, that went through all the rigorous kind of do things right? And then when it's published, we know it's already there, right? He doesn't need to take care of those elements. He needs to work on the science. He needs to work on the hypothesis. He needs to work on what is there and vouch for the science, not for the rest. So that's what we're trying to accelerate.
So it's easier said than done in terms of achieving all of this. I'm curious where was AstraZeneca on its journey? How far along are you? What are the different steps that you've taken so far?
Right. I want to answer one more thing before.
I know this we're politician.
Yes, I'm thinking how to answer yours, but one of the elements that we're thinking of, today science is being created at the speed of people, at the speed of human kind of brain, right? So creating that 1 million enzyme could be done, right? If there are only few of them, there is certain amount of work that you need to do, but it's limited. But in the world of LLMs, AI, and so on, they can become our scientists. So when you're doing experiments, those links will start to be created by those machines, those science creatures, and whatever other people are talking about. And the thinking about how can I vouch for those credibility, right? So I'll see more and more of those links being there. So I will need to have a framework that will need to make sure that done right, it's on whatever is being produced. And what is produced, not just the text, right? Not just the image, but the overall work. What was the hypothesis? What was the data that was used? What conclusion? What's the output? Can I really trust it? So everybody that was talking about experiment, in a sense, experiment is a link, right? In that trust. Eventually you choose between them and then you move forward. So the choosing and the links themselves are part of it. To your question, what is AstraZeneca? So we started this looking into the last mile about 2 years ago. And then we realized it's not the last mile, right? So that became that big concept about what we call fair analytics, trusted science. And by now it's part of a multi-year kind of program. Part of it is about verifying our data. We're making sure that the data foundation is right, the data product is right? Part of it is about this fair analytic. That it actually, if you think about it, it's not at the end, but this is a wrapping environment of the data, the processes, and so on. And part of it is also trying to understand how do we interact differently with the data? How do we integrate different systems? So in a sense, there is a data, there's fair analytic, and everything in between that will enable it. So we embarked on that journey actually this year. And what was really interesting is how this vision kind of caught us. It's almost caught like a fire, in a dry field, because it was appealing to the science group. It was really appealing to the infrastructure and people because now they have a vision to build towards, right? Now we have a way to at least describe how do I measure your system? How do I measure your environment, your proposed architecture, and does it fit into a big vision? So we have that one in place. Definitely fit in between the data people and the science people, the data science people. So we kind of introduced that as a vision for each one of them, but each one of them in a way that they understand how do they collaborate together? How does technology work with the process? How does the science work with the process? So at least it's a starting point of a vision that we can move from and adopt systems, adopt other technologies to enable it. But we're still in the quest for the tissue. I think what is missing for all of this is the tissue. So whether we made the right choice, we think so. But it is about the tissue, and what I would argue, let's work in this concept. Let's select the tissue that will enable working. right? And what is the tissue? It's about the people management, the process management, the access management, right? The pub sub of a collaboration. Because once you had selected those foundation, the rest will plug in. Or at least this is the vision. And meet me in a year or two, and we'll see where we are. But I think we're already on a very good start on that front.
Obviously, a lot of the things that you're affecting are intangibles, so that they're often difficult to quantify. But are there things that you will notice in the organization as a result of this? And it can be just as simple as buy-in from different parts of the organization and spread them to more teams.
It's a big success. Buying from with those partners, it's already a success, right? In a very big organization, unless you have the buy-in, most projects will not really continue. So having the buy-in, having a common interest vision, it's a big step moving forward. Now, saying that, it was clear to us, there was some really low-hanging fruits to address, right? Because if you can have a system or a flow, a vision that fits into the data office, the scientists and the AI managers, so already bringing a system that will address it, these are big wins, because today they have a lot of friction. How do you move from my data office had provisioning the data to the data science need to do something, and then you need to report it. So that's already a success, putting something like that will show what we call a collaborative science. So that floor is a starting point, right? Buying into a paradigm of access, about people, group access to data, to analytic and so on, it's already a starting point, because for many organizations, some of the friction are actually every silo system is doing an amazing job protecting you, but it's also protecting from collaboration. So if we can at least pick that shield layer that address those elements about collaborative science, we made a huge impact moving forward. And we're already getting people kind of feedback. This is awesome. We can do our work, and not only doing our work, we can actually see how we can share it. So the system itself is now only, so we have it in a sandbox. People like that one. We're now installing it internally, at least the system as a whole. But the concept by itself is starting to move people in an organization saying, how do I use it? And I think this is where the success is. People starting to say, how do I plug into the vision? Which is awesome, right? I don't even need to sell at this point. They're telling us what do they need and how do they want to work together. So on that front, it's a success. But again, it's really early days on either the system and the process. What we're seeing a lot of good sign about they're willing to use it.
Well, it almost sounds like by defining the vision more broadly, by having this more encompassing vision around this applying to the data science, machine learning, and AI lifecycle, as well as the data lifecycle, it almost sounds like you are able to get a lot more buy-in into the fundamentals on the FAIRR data side itself. You're able to, by selling it effectively to a broader community, by involving a broader community, you're actually able to action some of the things that we were just trying to achieve on the data governance, data lineage, data accessibility side of things. So it certainly seems like, well, actually, by starting with the broader vision, you can actually accelerate how fast you're going on the smaller, narrow one. Or again, is that reading far too much to what you're saying?
I think a great vision helps. And also if it is translated to the language that people are speaking, right? They don't care about orchestrator. They don't care about the notebook. They don't care about that, right? They would like to see it translated to them in the way of the flow, into what is everybody's kind of willing to, generating, and how is it being consumed. And selling it from psychology perspective, but what does somebody gain when he has this causal or lineage, right? So he can understand, why should I trust it? What's happened if something goes wrong? I mean, will I be notified? So you're talking to them in things that they are interested in. So this is on the kind of on the consumer side. On the other hand, why should you use this system if you're on the producing side? And one of the selling points was you would love to see your impacts, right? Or you would like to see your impact being measured and being tracked, because now I can see how my code, how my algorithm, how my data actually affected this clinical trial or that specific group. They need it for the goal reviews, for the end of year review. They need it for many other reasons. So you see a buy-in from both the producers as well as the consumers if you really tackle that chain between what I have done to what's the impact and vice versa. But this is the impact, who has contributed and who did what on that front. So yes, we needed to tackle it from a vision, psychology perspective, and many others to make it happen, including pick your strategic partners within the organization. Make sure that when you think about it, don't show just value to yourself. I mean, it's obviously that for me as an data science group, it will help me. But that's not enough because somebody needs to provide me data. Executive needs to read my outputs, right? So how do I connect them? And this is where this connecting tissue, vision, and the trusted science come into play. Eventually, it's going back to storage and data and catalogs and tons of other stuff, but you don't start from them. Start with a vision, then have a roadmap. So the first milestone will be successful. And then this is what I got from a startup kind of mentality, and where I was, do that one, get them not an MVP, but rather MDP, right? Which is a minimum delightful product, or whatever. And once they get it, they will fund the next evolution and the next. So this is what we're trying to do, right?
Send it into a self-sustaining virtuous cycle.
We hope so. That's going to be a spin wheel on that one. But hopefully with value, right? Not just because it's there, not because I'm going for the money, we're going for helping patients.
Well, Ronen, thank you. I want to